If I'd known what waited beyond that fence, I would have never followed Charles into the dark. I still hear the creak of that rusted coaster in my dreams, like it's calling me back to finish what we started. This happened many years ago, but the memory has never faded. I've never liked camping. I'm just not built for it. The dirt, the bugs, the freezing nights in a sleeping bag that somehow feels like a rock by morning. Unfortunately, I've been camping more times than I can count, though never by choice. My dad was one of those rugged, wilderness-loving types. Every summer, he dragged me out into the woods with his equally rugged friends to disconnect from technology and reconnect with nature. By sophomore year of high school, I'd had enough. I finally convinced him to let me bring a friend along to make it a little more bearable. To my surprise, he agreed. So, I brought Charles, a classmate and former Boy Scout who actually loved camping. You'd think that would make it worse, but Charles wasn't annoying about it. He teased me, sure, but not in a mean way. Plus, I figured if I had to suffer, at least I'd be with someone who knew how to pitch a tent without collapsing it on top of us. He was excited, partly because he loved camping, but mostly because it gave him an excuse to get away from home. But things went sideways before we even unpacked. One of my dad's friends had messed up the booking. Instead of some remote, peaceful spot deep in the woods, we ended up at a crowded campground, indoor bathrooms, paved walkways, even a playground for little kids. It was camping for people who didn't like camping. My dad was furious. And the cherry on top, right next to the campsite was a mini amusement park. I'm talking carnival games, a Ferris wheel, roller coasters, the works. The two worlds didn't belong together. The bright lights of the park blinked like eyes between the trees, and even from our tents we could hear the metallic groan of rides winding down for the night. Everyone was irritated. My dad muttered about fake camping, and Charles wouldn't shut up about it either. He joked that my family didn't know what real camping was. I told him to knock it off, and he did, but his grin stayed. We had no choice but to stay. The grown-ups sulked while Charles and I set up camp. To his credit, he made it look easy. Within minutes our tent was up, the knots perfect, the rainfly taut. Even my dad gave a rare nod of approval. Charles and I shared a tent. After dinner, we slipped away, pretending we needed to organize our stuff. Truth was, Charles had brought a small metal pipe and a little weed hidden in an Altoids tin. We wandered into the woods, smoked, and laughed quietly at our own stupidity. The forest felt alive, crickets chirping, wind stirring the leaves, distant laughter from the park fading into silence. When we got back, the campsite had gone still. We talked for hours until Charles got that mischievous look I knew too well. He wanted to explore. At first, I thought he meant the campground. But no, he meant the amusement park. The idea hit like electricity. Climbing a roller coaster in the middle of the night sounded insane, dangerous, and thrilling. Once we were sure everyone was asleep, we grabbed our flashlights and slipped out. It was well past midnight when we reached the fence. The air was cold, heavy with mist. The distant Ferris wheel loomed against the dark sky like a dead giant frozen mid-motion. The fence wasn't high. Charles gave me a boost, and we were in. Inside, the place was dead silent except for the faint hum of power still running through the rides. Security guards patrolled in golf carts, their headlights slicing across the empty pathways. We ducked behind a snack shack, hearts pounding, trying not to breathe too loud. The whole thing felt like a stealth video game, except this time, getting caught would mean cops, not checkpoints. We crept through the park, hiding in shadows, moving when the light shifted. The sound of the metal coaster settling in the wind made the hairs on my neck stand up. When we reached the base of the coaster, it looked impossibly tall. The steel reflected the moonlight like wet bone. The maintenance stairs ran alongside the main track, and we started climbing. Each step clanged softly, echoing into the emptiness. Halfway up, there were no railings. One wrong move and we'd drop straight down. But we didn't stop. When we finally reached the top, the view was unreal. The entire amusement park stretched below us, dark, empty, and wrong. The campground lights flickered in the distance like faint embers. We took one photo, then turned off our flashlights. Up there, the wind carried strange sounds, metal groans, whispers of leaves, and something else. Faint. Like breathing that wasn't ours. I told myself it was the wind. We stayed just long enough to feel brave, then decided to climb back down. The descent felt faster, heavier, like the park was watching us go. We crept toward the fence again, but something in the dark made us freeze. That's where it all started to go wrong. You ever get that sinking feeling? Like something's watching you from the dark? I used to think it was just my imagination, until that night at the lake, when I realized the darkness sometimes watches back. Charles and I were crouched behind an old snack shack, trying to stay out of sight. One of the park guards was doing his round in a golf cart, the headlights sweeping over the empty field like silent searchlights. We stayed completely still, barely breathing, waiting for him to pass. Then, I noticed movement. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light. Maybe the shadow from the golf cart bouncing off a trash can or something. But Charles tapped my arm, hard, and pointed in the same direction. That's when I saw it too. About 30 feet away, between two dark buildings, someone was crouching. Just like us. Like they were also hiding, sneaking. Charles and I locked eyes, both frozen in silent panic. Then, just as quickly as he appeared, the man slipped back into the shadows. The guard finally drove past, and we took our chance. We didn't speak. We just ran, quietly but fast, back toward the fence we'd climbed earlier. Every few seconds I looked back, half expecting to see that man following us. But there was nothing. When we reached the fence, we climbed over and dropped down the other side. This time, there were no jokes, no laughs, just silence. We hurried back to our tent and zipped ourselves in. Neither of us said a word. That night, I lay there staring at the roof of the tent, listening to every sound outside. We tried convincing ourselves it was just some homeless guy, but deep down, I didn't believe it. The next morning, everything seemed normal. We packed up our stuff and started getting ready to go fishing. Around 10 a.m., one of the camp staff came around with an announcement for everyone. A man had been stabbed and killed at a lake just 4 miles from the campground. The suspect was still on the loose. They describe him as a shirtless, disheveled white male in his late 30s, possibly injured, possibly bleeding. Charles and I froze. We didn't even need to look at each other. We knew. It was him. The man in the dark. But we didn't say anything. Not to my dad. Not to the rangers. Nothing. And I don't know why. Maybe we were scared of getting in trouble. Maybe we just didn't want to believe it. Now, years later, I still think about that night. How close we came to a murderer. How easily it could have gone differently if he'd seen us first. And every time I close my eyes, I can still see his face, red, twisted, and staring right back at me from the dark. They say fear hits differently when you realize the nightmare is real. I didn't believe that, until the day I was chased through a subway tunnel by something that shouldn't have existed, something wearing a clown's face. The moment the clown stepped into my path, time froze. His makeup was cracked, his smile smeared, and his eyes, cold and human, stared right through me. I tried to move, but before I could, he lunged. He came at me fast, trying to tackle me. I barely dodged him and bolted, my shoes echoing off the tiled floor as I sprinted down the platform. His footsteps followed, a jerky, uneven rhythm, like his limbs didn't move right. When I glanced back, my heart dropped. He wasn't empty-handed anymore. He was holding a knife. It glimmered under the flickering subway lights. I had no idea where he'd been hiding it. I didn't care. I just ran. The 96th Street station was nearly deserted. No witnesses. No one to call for help. Just me, and a clown with a knife. I hit the stairs 2 at a time, burst into the street, and screamed for help. By the time the police got there, he was gone. Vanished. Like he'd melted back into the tunnels. Even after the officers told me I was safe, I couldn't stop picturing that face. The twisted grin. The knife. The sound of those uneven footsteps behind me. For weeks, I kept checking over my shoulder, convinced he'd somehow find where I lived. He never did. But that didn't make it easier to sleep. Later, I'd see my story mentioned in passing, one of the many clown sightings that swept across the country in 2016. But mine wasn't a hoax. I know what I saw, and I'll never forget how close I came to dying under the streets of New York. This next story isn't your typical campfire horror tale. But trust me, it gets dark. 2 years after college, I was desperate for work, any work. I spent nights scrolling job listings, half asleep, half broke, hoping something would stick. That's when I found it. A lifeguard job. At a hotel. But not a normal one. The posting said the hours were 5 p.m. to 1 a.m. Who the hell swims at midnight? Even stranger, it said applicants must not speak Spanish. That threw me. I'd spoken Spanish since I was a kid. I'm half Mexican. And the town this hotel was in? Mostly Spanish-speaking. It didn't make sense. Still, $30 an hour was too good to pass up. I figured I'd just pretend I didn't know the language. A few hours after applying, they called. I got the job. On my first day, I pulled up to the hotel. It looked perfectly normal. A heavyset guy came out to greet me. Friendly, warm, cracking jokes. I relaxed. But then another man appeared. Tall, quiet, watching me like a hawk. He didn't introduce himself, didn't smile, just started speaking rapid Spanish to me. I understood every word, but I kept my face blank, pretending I didn't. He talked about the weather, about how late it was getting, all while studying me like he was dissecting something. After a few seconds, he turned to the other guy. They both started laughing, like I just failed some private test. The tall man finally smiled. He said his name was Hafer, and the other guy was Esteban. They led me through the complex to the pool area. The air smelled faintly of chlorine and something else, metallic. Hafer explained that the hotel wanted to increase revenue by opening the pool at night and charging non-guests to swim. He said they didn't want a Spanish-speaking employee because it reduced conflict with outsiders. The logic didn't add up, but the pay was good, so I played along. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that the whole thing was off. The way they kept exchanging glances. The way the lights around the pool flickered even though the rest of the hotel glowed perfectly fine. I didn't know it yet, but that pool held secrets. And before the week was over, I'd find out why they really wanted someone who couldn't understand Spanish. There's something about water at night, it hides things. Things that move just beneath the surface, waiting for someone foolish enough to look too long. When I took that lifeguard job, I thought my only concern would be keeping swimmers safe. I had no idea the real danger would come from what was happening behind me. My responsibilities were simple, or so they said. Watch the pool. Collect money from non-guests. Call Hafer if there was any trouble. Then came one last instruction. If anyone shows you a blue wristband, let them into the pool house. The pool house was a massive windowless building right behind my stand. I didn't ask questions. For the first few weeks, everything felt normal. Kids splashing, tourists drinking, laughter echoing off the tile walls. Nobody flashed a wristband. Then one evening, a bulky man in a white shirt and dark shades walked up. He didn't speak a word of English, just lifted his arm to show the blue band. I unlocked the pool house door. He went inside and disappeared for nearly an hour. When he came back out, his backpack looked heavier, stuffed. I told myself it was none of my business. But it kept happening. More wristbands. More strangers. Groups of them, sometimes showing up after midnight. The pool became busier than ever. Money poured in. Too much money. People would overpay me, handing over $100 bills for a $10 entry. I called Hafer about it. He just said, "Don't worry about it," and hung up. That was the moment I realized this wasn't a pool. It was a front. And the pool house? That was the real business. Drugs, laundering, maybe worse, I didn't know. But I could feel it. Every night, something illegal was happening a few yards behind my chair. The guests started acting friendly, especially the wristband people. They'd greet me by name, slip me tips, talk freely in Spanish, forgetting, or maybe knowing, that I understood every word. Shipment, cash, police. I heard enough to confirm my fears. Then one afternoon, a little boy slipped under the water. Instinct took over. I dove in and saved him. The crowd cheered, clapping and shouting my name. Later, Hafer himself came down to thank me. Turned out, the kid I'd saved was his son. The next day, they held a celebration by the pool. Wine, toasts, laughter. For a moment, I almost forgot the unease. Until one man raised his glass and spoke in Spanish. To all the money we make, and all the lives we destroy. Everyone laughed. My blood ran cold. That night, I couldn't sleep. The next day, my mom called while I was on shift. She spoke only Spanish, so naturally, that's what I used. I thought I was alone when I hung up, until I turned around. Esteban was standing right behind me. He didn't blink, didn't smile, just stared. Then, in perfect English, he asked, "How long have you known Spanish?" My throat went dry. I lied, said I was just practicing. He didn't respond, just stuttered me like he was deciding something. After an eternity, he finally muttered "okay," and walked away. I sat frozen in that chair, praying he wouldn't come back. Minutes before my shift ended, he approached again. This time, his tone was calm. "Come an hour early tomorrow," he said. I have a new opportunity for you." Then he handed me $200. When he turned to leave, I knew that opportunity would be my last. I didn't show up the next day. I never went back. For months, I was a wreck, paranoid, sleepless, scanning every car that passed my house. Even now, years later, I still don't know the full truth. They were moving drugs, that much is clear. But why did they need me? Maybe I was just a cover, a clean name on payroll in case the cops came snooping. Or maybe I was being groomed for something worse. All I know is that when Esteban looked at me that final time, his eyes were empty. And in that silence, I could tell he was picturing how easy it would be to make me disappear.